people see labels. That's what they see. They no longer see the entity. They no longer see the passion. They no longer see the heart. They no longer see the intention.
But what do you think actually causes them to come up? Like, it's not just hearing the word fuck come out of your mouth. Like, they are threatened by something. Like,
for sure, yeah. By their own bullshit, by their own self-deceit. And the ego never wants to see its own games. It never wants to see its own victimization, because then it loses the right to postpone its self-responsibility. So, yeah, that's not comfortable, right? Having to face yourself. And sometimes, again, like I said, there are cases, and maybe many cases, maybe more than I give credit for, or more than I cater to anyway in my work. But there's teachers for that. That's great, right? We don't all have to teach the same audience or demographic or standard or level. There are people that genuinely won't be able to hear a message if you use the word idiot. Like, it stops their whole process. It's offensive to them. Okay, well, it's not an ideal state to be. I would encourage you to look into why you're so disempowered by a line on the piece of paper, and can't therefore see into the truth of the situation or the person or the dialogue anymore. While you're so swayed by labels and words, please investigate it for your own sake. But for the most part, I think people should grow up a little bit. Like, there's a lot of people that are ready to break out of that shell, and they just refuse to, because it's not comfortable to begin to face the self.
Because if there's a particular word or phrase that triggers people, a lot of people use it to, maybe unintentionally, but they disempower themselves by reacting to it. But they could really empower themselves, like you're saying, by investigating it and looking at it. So it's kind of like your triggers are your gateway into freedom, but a lot of people don't see it as that. We don't recognize it as that.
There's a high demand for mirrors in the psychology of entities, because that intelligence in each entity that is unbeknownst to the conscious mind of that entity wants to see itself. It wants to get something reflected that it could never get fully exposed or reflected in a relationship with another person who is not transparent to this mirror state. Because, and this is the reason why we attract this type of relationship, that type of relationship, these types of friends, these types of themes. It's like we get 5% of a reflection from this person, but that's all we can get, because they're blocked by their own personality and their own biases. So now it's a warfare of reflections, and it's this mixed bag of reflections, and it's not a clear reflection. Plus, we don't even know typically that that's what's happening, that we're just reflecting each other for learning purposes. But in the case of a mirror, 100% of the availability of what can come through that entity is 100% tailored to you, undistorted by that personal entity's personal mind. And so they're in high demand, because you can get a lifetime of reflections in a very short interaction, sometimes not even in a single word being spoken, just energetically, vibrationally, through body language or an eye gaze or an energetic exchange. If there is a somewhat significant difference between one person in a relationship and the other person in a relationship when it comes to their transparency to the truth, to the mirror state, to the God state, to true clarity, to a clear consciousness free of bias. If there's quite a significant difference between that one person in the relationship, even if it's a regular partnership relationship or a friendship, then quite naturally, that being who is more transparent will act predominantly as the teacher, whether or not that is seen. Now, every time we teach, we learn. Every time we learn, we teach. So it's not a separate thing. And it's not about better or worse or like more valuable and less valuable. But naturally, just by the metaphysics of it, it's the physics of the invisible. It's the physics of consciousness, the physics of energy. That being will become like sort of the shepherd figure in that situation, or the teacher, predominantly the teacher role. And you see this all the time. Like every relationship is teacher-student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And usually it exchanges itself and goes back and forth, or it's at the same time, and it can get really confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why relationships are so confusing. The ultimate relationship is from the eager student to the true mirror. That is the ultimate when it comes to the perspective of learning and the growth and the reason that we're here to wake up to who we really are. That's the most potent, it's not really a relationship, but that's the most potent dynamic that two beings could have. And it's the most beneficial to the creator. It's the most direct path to the creator knowing itself in that exchange.